Her hands were shaking as she held the small hospital blanket close. The world outside her window felt too big, too loud, too cruel. She thought no one would ever believe her. Not about the pain, not about the fear. But miles away, 97 strangers started their engines, their hearts beating as one. They didn't know her name yet. But soon, they would change her life forever. Before we begin, hit subscribe. It's appreciated. It was a quiet morning in a small town where everyone knew each other by name. 12-year-old Emily sat on the porch steps, tracing small shapes on the wooden rail with her finger. To anyone passing by, she looked like an ordinary girl. Soft smile, neat hair, quiet eyes. But behind that stillness was a heart that carried too much fear for someone so young. Her stepfather, Dan, was a man with a loud voice and a temper that could change with the wind. In public, he smiled and called her kiddo. But at home, the walls knew another story. One told in whispers and silent tears. Her mother tried to keep peace, working long hours at the local diner, pretending not to see the cracks forming in her daughter's smile. Emily found small pieces of comfort in things most people wouldn't notice. The stray dog that waited by the bus stop every morning. The teacher who always said good job even when her hands trembled during class. She had learned how to hide pain well, how to make herself small enough not to be noticed. One rainy afternoon, she sat in her room with the sound of thunder covering her quiet sobs. She made a promise to herself that one day she would be free. But she didn't know freedom would come in a way no one could have imagined. At the edge of town, a group of bikers from a club called the Guardians were finishing a charity ride for abused children. They didn't know Emily yet, didn't know her story, or the storm waiting behind her fragile smile. But soon, their paths would cross, and the world would watch something powerful unfold. If you were in their place, what would you have done? Tell us in the comments. The days passed slowly for Emily. Each one felt heavier than the last. She learned to read the sound of footsteps, the way the door creaked when her stepfather came home. School became her only safe place, even though she spoke very little there. Her teacher, Mrs. Harris, noticed the quiet sadness behind her polite smile. She started asking gentle questions, never pushing too hard, just letting Emily know she was seen. One afternoon, when Emily stayed behind to clean the classroom, Mrs. Harris saw the bruise on her wrist. It was small but enough to break her heart. She didn't say a word right away. She only said softly, "You're not alone." That night, after Emily went home, Mrs. Harris made a phone call that would start a chain of events none of them could have imagined. Child services got involved. For the first time, someone was listening. But when Dan found out, the mask came off. His anger grew like a storm. Emily's mother tried to protect her, but fear had taken hold of their house long ago. One night, when things got out of control, the neighbors called the police. Emily was taken to the hospital, scared, bruised, but finally safe. The news spread quietly through town. One of the nurses who helped Emily was related to a member of the Guardians, the biker club known for protecting children who had survived abuse. They were tough-looking people with tattoos and leather jackets, but behind their rough image were hearts that had seen too much pain. When they heard about Emily, about what she had endured, and the fear that her stepfather might try to reach her again, something inside them stirred. The next morning, the sound of engines rolled through the town. People looked out of their windows, wondering what was happening. 97 bikers rode together toward the hospital, their headlights cutting through the mist like fireflies in the dawn. Inside her hospital room, Emily sat by the window, staring at the gray sky. She didn't know about the army of strangers riding for her. All she felt was the quiet ache of being unwanted, unseen. But outside, the rumble grew louder. The nurses whispered. The doctors peeked through the blinds. And when Emily finally looked out, she saw them. Rows of motorcycles parked in front of the hospital, men and women standing in silence, hands folded over their hearts. It wasn't anger that brought them there. It was love. It was the promise that no child would ever feel alone again. Emily didn't understand at first who they were or why they had come. But when one of the bikers lifted a handmade sign that said, "You're safe now, kiddo," something broke open inside her. Tears fell quietly down her cheeks. For the first time, she believed that maybe kindness could be louder than fear. Have you ever carried pain in silence, hoping one day someone would truly see you? Tell us in the comments. The hospital was silent except for the steady hum of machines and the faint sound of rain on the window. Emily sat curled on her bed, watching the bikers outside through the glass. They hadn't moved for hours, standing guard like a wall of hope. Nurses passed by with small smiles, whispering, "They're here for you." Then, late that afternoon, the thing everyone feared happened. Dan arrived. His face was cold, his steps quick. He shouted her name at the front desk, demanding to see her. But before he could take another step, the sound of engines roared to life. The bikers closed ranks. 97 of them stood shoulder to shoulder, their leather jackets soaked by the rain, their presence unshakable. Not one raised a hand or a voice. They didn't need to. Their silence was louder than his anger. The hospital doors stayed closed. Inside, Emily's heart pounded as she realized what was happening. For the first time, she wasn't the one trembling. He was. Dan shouted again, his voice breaking in the storm. But his power was gone. The police soon arrived, and within minutes, he was escorted away. Not as a man in control, but as someone finally seen for what he had done. Emily pressed her palm against the window as tears filled her eyes. Outside, the bikers nodded to her, a small, wordless promise that she would never face this alone again. In that moment, something changed deep inside her. The fear that had lived in her chest for so long began to fade, replaced by something stronger. Trust, hope, belief. What would you have done if this truth was suddenly staring back at you? Tell us in the comments. When the rain finally stopped, the world outside felt calm again. The bikers stayed until they knew Emily was safe, standing quietly under the gray sky. One by one, they came inside, not to speak, but to show her she was part of a family now. One of them placed a small leather vest beside her bed. On the back it said, "Little Guardian." From that day on, Emily wasn't the same frightened girl. She began to smile more, talk more. She still had bad dreams sometimes, but now she had people she could call, people who cared. The Guardians visited often. They brought her gifts, laughter, and a kind of protection that went deeper than walls or locks. It was love, real and simple. Months later, she stood outside the hospital again, this time with sunshine on her face. The same roar of engines filled the air, but now it wasn't a sound of fear. It was freedom. She ran toward them, her tiny vest fluttering in the wind. The bikers lifted her high, cheering. She laughed for the first time in a long time, the kind of laugh that said, "I'm okay now." The story spread across towns, across screens, across hearts. People called it a miracle, but those who were there knew it wasn't about fame or cameras. It was about what happens when strangers choose kindness over silence. 97 people proved that compassion can be louder than cruelty. Emily grew up remembering that day, not as the day her pain ended, but as the day her hope began. And sometimes, when she passes by a hospital or hears the sound of motorcycles in the distance, she smiles softly and whispers, "Thank you." What part of this story stayed with you the most? Tell us in the comments, show some love with a like, and subscribe to stay inspired.